Good morning, everyone. My name is Oni Mutanga. I'm the acting dean and head of school for the School of Agricultural, Earth and Environmental Science. I would like to welcome you all to this symposium, which comes at a time when the school and the university at large are actually promoting multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. This symposium, the main theme for this year is on agripreneurship and sustainable agricultural value chain. This is actually critical in promoting multidisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, and it brings together various stakeholders from various disciplines, as well as communities and industry partners.
In our work with communities in rural areas, one of the things that has emerged and also consistent with our government's priorities and challenges is the poverty, unemployment, inequality nexus, which continues to inflict a lot of damage and challenges in rural communities. And also the fact that there are very few opportunities for youths and other people in those areas. Now, agriculture offers genuine and serious opportunities in those areas, given that most people have access to land which they can cultivate. And in certain areas, agriculture has always been the predominant activity.
Our main focus is to work with smallholder farmers, trying to improve their production, agricultural production. But of necessity, we have to work with them. We can't just work on production, but we have to work on improving their access to markets. So it's a whole value chain that we have to consider.
The ACCI and most of our crop sciences now training and capacity development, we are trying to push the focus on value chains, research and development, because most of our students, most of our postgraduate students, before they are doing their project, we really wanted them to do a participatory rural appraisal, which is a PRA study. And the reason is to know the needs and preference of the farmers. So based on these principles, then they should be able to breed what is required by the farmers in the value chain.
So we look at the access to inputs and particularly how they can organize themselves so that they can then be able to use economies of scale to approach suppliers and get the produce at or inputs at a reasonable prices. We also work with them to try to amalgamate their own production so that then they can sell bigger quantities.
In terms of food production, fertilizers are a key resource. And if you look at fertilizer, particularly phosphorus, current global estimates suggest that we've reached peak phosphorus production and there's a decline in the amount of phosphate reserve that we have. So it's estimated that probably maybe in the next 100 to, depending on different models, we might actually run out of phosphorus reserve, because phosphorus is not renewable. It's not like nitrogen. We mine it. Now, in terms of sustainability, if we continue using chemical fertilizer, in terms of being able to have sustainable value chains, it's just not going to be possible. That now means that in terms of our research, the focus is we have to go to where the phosphorus is being deposited, which in this case is with our waste material, and recover it and reuse it. And in that case, and in that manner, we will be able to ensure sustainability.
I think, like most people in the school, our interest has been trying to find out what exactly do farmers do, and what are their aspirations, and what opportunities and challenges are there for them. So the one thing that has consistently come up, obviously, is that farmers aspire to supply bigger markets. But they don't see themselves entering into that space from where they stand. So it's mostly always about if I have more land, if I have more water, if I have more input. But we have actually then gone down to see and noticed that it is about those things. That's very right. But there are also other things that that matter. Things like the amount of training that the farmers have, the amount of exposure that the farmers have had to markets.
Here in Pietermaritzburg, we have a very strong agricultural department within our institution. So we have a lot of support. For example, Sue van der Merwe was very instrumental in us prototyping, if I can say, our sex-based project. She gave us input, gave us a piece of land to work on. So that gives us kind of strength because we don't have as many resources as any other NGO that does this on a day-to-day basis. But we as students need any help we can get. And also, agriculture is the bread and butter of most South Africans, right? Because of our history, we weren't able to educate ourselves to the point where we become professionals. And the best thing, or the one thing that we have access to as South Africans is land, and what we can do that is low capital investment, if I can say that requires low capital investment, is agriculture.
The major problem we have in the smallholder farming sector is that their plots are quite small, and individually they cannot meet the market requirements. So for them to be viable, or for their relationship with buyers to be viable, then they have to be to come together with others. And then that also entails ensuring that their produce is of a certain quality, which then they can put together and supply to earmarked outlets.
From where I was at the beginning, thinking of food security from more of a food has been produced, how do we then preserve it? But then to actually see that who is preserving the food, what challenges do they have, what opportunities do they have? I think for me that has been the greatest gain from working in a transdisciplinary setup.
So when we talk of building sustainable value chains, we're basically talking about supporting farmers from the entry point, the startup point of these value chains, where we look at things like seed systems, understanding the indigenous seed systems, how they contribute, the linkages with the formal seed systems. We are talking about improving production in rural farms, improving the productivity, sustainable intensification, things like intercropping, growing more crops on the same piece of land. Then of course there are the big questions of what do farmers do when you help them to grow more? What do they do with the yield? How do they utilize the crop? How do they store the crop? So it also opens up opportunities and questions around post-harvest handling and storage and utilization of these crops, which is a very important aspect that farmers need to be trained on.
We found that following the value chains is key for our successful breeding and commercialization of improved varieties, which are really with improved seed and quality seed for the growers.